Acts chapter 10, verses 24 to 43, Peter and Cornelius. We start off in chapter 24. It begins, «Ke ti epavrion, isilthon, is tin Caesarion». And the next day they entered into Caesarea, and they would be the two servants of the centurion, the soldier, Peter, and his friends, all going to Caesarea. We'll go here to a map of Caesarea, and they're going down here to Joppa. I think it's like 30 miles. And it continues, «O they Cornelius in prostokon avtus». Now Cornelius was expecting them. «Sing kalasamanos tus sing genis avtu, ketus anakeus philus», having called together his relatives and important friends. Well, if I saw an angel and an angel told me to do something and I did it, I would expect something fantastic to happen, not knowing what it would be, but anxious to find out. And I'm sure Cornelius was anxious. In verse 25, «Oste ageneto isilthin ton petron», and as it came to pass at Peter entering. Now I'm guessing that the Cornelius had a large house with servants and so forth, and he probably had some type of a greeting room, a vestibule where he met a person that came in, and then the rest of the house they would go to afterwards. And so Peter entering, it says, «Synantisus avto o Cornelius». Cornelius, having met him, «Person epitus podus», having fallen at the feet, «proskinason», did obeisance. So here we see again, obeisance is falling at the feet of somebody in a prostrate position with your hands on the ground to a higher authority, which Cornelius felt that Peter was. Now the King James, as I mentioned so many times, for this proskynesin uses the word worship. But today the meaning for worship completely is different than what it was in the Greek original. So the important thing is to have the Greek original, which we have right here, rather than an English translation where you don't see the Greek word. In verse 26, «O they Petros igere avton», but Peter raised him, legon, saying, «Anas theti, kago avtos anthropos emi». Rise up, I also am a man. In verse 27, «Ke sinomilon avto», and accompanying him, «Isilthe», he entered, «Ke evriski sinalilithotas polus», found many having come together. So this must have been a large house, and so now they're going in from that vestibule into the room, and then all of a sudden Peter sees all these people. And what does he say? It says in verse 28, «Ephite pros avtus», and he said to them, «Emis epistaste os athemiton estin andri». You know that it's unlawful for a man, Eudeo, a Jew, kolaste e proserkiste allophilo, to join or approach a Philistine. So this is something that the Jews still sometimes do today. Certain ones, like the Hasidic Jews, will stay away from anybody that's not of their tribe, of their class. Consider them, it's a Philistine is a word, but allophilo means other tribes. But generally a Philistine in this sense is somebody that is not a Jew, is unclean. Sort of a derogatory way of using this allophilo. There is the word Philistine spelt in the Greek letters, in other places, though, where it is truly Philistine. And then when that happens, I capitalize the P in Philistine. And it continues, Ke emi o theos edixe, and God showed to me, mi thana kinon e akatharton, legin anthropon, not to call a man common or unclean. So now the uncleanness here is something that the Jews were very aware of and stayed away from the certain dietary prohibitions, kept the dietary laws, didn't eat unclean meats, didn't touch dead bodies, all sorts of things that God had put down in the law of Moses. But here, Peter has seen that sheep being let down with all these unclean animals and told to eat them. So he knows that this uncleanness goes to humans becoming unclean, because basically calling a man unclean, it says right here. But it's going to change. He says in 29, Theo ke antiritos ilthon, therefore also indisputably I came, meta pemphthis, having been fetched, pinthanoma un tini logo, meta pempsaste me. Verse 30. I came having been fetched. I inquired of him, what is the matter? You fetched me. Ke o Cornelius, ephi apo, tetartis imeras, mekritavtis tis oris, emin ni stevon. Cornelius said, from 4 days ago until this hour, I was fasting. A man who knows to worship or to fall down at the feet of God and to do the things that would be required of a person. Fasting would be one way, praising, praying, all sorts of ways of communicating with the Father through prayer, and here the fasting. So he was a pious man, we're told earlier. Ketin anatin oran prosev homenos ento eco mu, in the 9th hour praying. So not only was he fasting, but he is praying in my house. Ke idu anir, and behold, anir esti enopion mu, in estheti lampra. A man stood before me in bright attire. Now he had a human form because he calls him a man. It wasn't an angelic being that didn't look like a human. Here we do have a person, a being from another world. Just as where that sheet came down, the heaven opened, it says, Peter could see. So this other dimension. In verse 31, Ke fisi, and he says, Cornelius, isi kusti su e prosevhi. Your prayer was listened to. Wow, that's wonderful. Ke e eleimosine su emnisthisan enopion tu theou. And your gifts of charity were remembered before God. Another way of communicating with God is by charity, doing good things for other people, helping them whenever they have a need. Or even if there's no need, giving to the ecclesia, the assembly, giving money to the assembly to continue the word of God, spread it out in the neighborhoods. And then verse 32, Pempson un is Ioape, send forth then unto Joppa, ke metakalasa Simona, and call for Simon, os epikalite Petros, who is called Peter. Now it's interesting. The imperative is he has to do this, but it's interesting that uses both names, that God uses the name Simon and then Peter. and says then, Utos xenizete in Ikia Simonos Verseos Parathalasan. This one lodges in the house of Simon a tanner by the sea. Now I mentioned again before, he's lodging there, he's not living there for good. Os paragenomenos lalisisi, who, having come, will speak to you. Exaptis un, immediately then, empempsa prose, I sent to you. Si te kalos episas paragenomenos, and you did well, having come. Nin, now then, pantas emis enopion to theou paresmen acuse pantata prostatagmena si hypo to theou. Now all we are before God are at hand to hear all the things having been assigned to you by God. Wow, that's quite an amazing thing to have happen to this centurion who has a piousness towards the God of Israel, apparently, but yet the Romans had other gods in Greek mythology, and so he's basically not following, apparently, the religions of the Romans, but he's following the religion of the Jews, and now he's finding out there's even something more. In verse 34, Anixos the Petros to stoma af tu, and Peter, having opened his mouth, said, Epaletheos kata lamvanomai oti uk esti prosopolyptis o theos. In truth, I am overtaken that God is not one who discriminates. God loves the creation, I believe. Now, why he chose to reveal himself, as far as we know, first was to Noah, even in a world where there was sin, where he had to bring about a flood, destroy the earth, and then rebuild it, as far as with after Noah. And then the next time is basically, that I can think of, would be Abram. Now, why he chose Abram to speak to him and give him the promises and covenants and so forth is a mystery to us, but not to God, of course. And then the Jews coming through Israel, Jacob, the 12 tribes, coming down, even down to today. And during that period of time, and Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. But now, God is opening up from just these people that he chose. Why? I don't know. Why are just certain people? But there are people in the world that, like in the Amazon or America, that the natives, that people in the other parts of the world didn't even know existed. So God has his reasons for how he has done things in human history, and we can question it, wonder, but that's about it. Now here, God is now opening up the realm of his communication to man, to everyone, even though a lot at this time, 22,000 years ago, a lot of people didn't hear anything about Jesus. Still, probably places they still haven't. But now Peter is seeing that it's opened up. No longer is it just to the Jew, but it's to other people. But it's still on the dark side of understanding for Peter, because the things that are going to be happening here in the book of Acts will demonstrate how there's way more to the story, to the expansion of Christianity. Now, I mentioned in the last video about Cornelius and the centurions, how they were finding out about who Jesus was and building that room with the mosaic. So it's getting So the word about Jesus is spreading. In verse 35, Al en panti ethni o phovumenos avton, but in every nation, the one fearing him, ke ergazomenos dikeosinin, and practicing righteousness, dektos avto esti, is acceptable to him. Now it's interesting, he doesn't say here that they have to have believing in Jesus, because if the people that are living in other places in the world are righteous, doing the righteous things, but they haven't heard of Jesus, then that's acceptable to God. This is what I see. Now, other people may disagree and say, well, you have to have Jesus. And so, well, what about the people that were in other parts of the world before the discovery of the Americas? Well, I believe that if a person was righteous, just as Abraham was righteous, he was not a Christian, of course. So he was accepted by God, so why not these other people? In verse 36, ton logon on apostile tis iis Israel, the word which he sent to the sons of Israel, evangelizomenos, announcing good news, irinin dia Isu Christou, peace through Jesus Christ. Utos esti panton Kyrios, this one is Lord of all. Oh, wow. Now the centurion hearing this, peace, as him being a man of war, it must have shook him as far as hearing these words, in that this peace comes through Jesus Christ, and that he is Lord, that is, it doesn't say that he is God, but Lord of all. But I believe, of course, he is God. And then verse 37, he continues, Emis idate to genomenon rima kath olistis Iudeas. You have known the thing having taken place in all Judea. Arxamenon apotis Galileas, having begun from Galilee, meta to baptismao ekirixen Ioannis, after the immersion which John proclaimed, John the Immerser, Isun ton apo Nazareth, Jesus, the one from Nazareth, os ekrisen avton o theos pneumati agio, how God anointed him in agio pneumati, this powerful force, pneumata that's dedicated to God, how he was anointed. So now, this is what I was saying in the sections before, that Cornelius had probably heard about the crucifixion and the resurrection. Here Peter is acknowledging that. And it continues, so in power. Os diilthen evergeton ke iomenos pantas tus kata dinastevomenus ipo to the avolu, who went through benefiting and healing all the ones being overpowered by the devil, by casting out the demons and so forth. Oti otheos in met avtu, for God was with him. He's telling this all to Cornelius, and all these people are listening. Ke emis esmen martyris panton on episan en te hora ton Iudeon. And we are witnesses of all of which he did, both in the region of the Jews, ke in Jerusalem, and in Jerusalem. We've seen all this. We were with him. On anilon cremasantes epi xilu, whom they did away with, having hanged upon a timber. So he's saying that we were with him. We saw all the things that happened, even unto Jerusalem. And then he brings out whom they did away with. He doesn't say the Romans, even though the Roman soldiers were there, but yet they were the rulers of the Jews. So he's not blaming the Romans here. So Cornelius now knows that this man has come from God. He's seen it. He's seen the angel. He knows it's from God. He knows that the things that Peter is saying are true. And then Peter's saying, we saw it. We saw who he was. We were with him. And so this would give these people a confirmation, well, this is the way it is. This man did rise from the dead. In verse 40, Touton o theos igere ti triti imera. This one God raised up in the third day. So they're hearing that. Wow, this we heard actually did happen. He did come back from the dead. I'm sure they were flabbergasted to hear that and know that this is what happened. Now, people don't come back from the dead after 3 days. Ke edoken afton emphani geneste, and appointed him to become a parent. Jesus to become a parent to everyone, basically, which he is today. Verse 41, upanti toleo, but not to all the people, alla martisi tis proskekirotoni menus. Oh boy, that's a hard one. Ipotutheu, not to all the people, but to witnesses having been inaugurated by God, that is actually seeing Jesus here. Imin itanes synephagomen ke synepiomen avto meta to anastine avton ek nekron. To us who ate with and drank with him after his rising up from out of dead ones. He died on the cross. The Romans centurions can verify this to Cornelius if he needed it. And so after this, then Jesus appeared to a certain amount of people, which was to these, and he was a human form. He ate and drank, it says. Ke pari gilan imin kirikse to. And he exhorted us to proclaim to the Leo people, ke dia martiraste oti aptos estin o orismenos ipotutheu kritis zonton ke nekron. And to testify that he is the one having been confirmed by God as judge of the living and the dead ones. Well, so now what Peter is saying, he's going to be judging dead ones. Well, he has to be someplace to be able to judge them, and that would be in heaven, I suppose. So there's way more to the story that Cornelius has not even heard yet. He's now here in the very beginning. In verse 43, tuto pantes e prophete martyrusin. To him all the prophets bear witness. So he's telling Cornelius that these prophets came and they're bearing witness to the coming of the Messiah. So this would probably stir the interest of Cornelius to study the Old Testament. Aphasin amartion lavin diato dia tu onomatos av tu, to receive a release of sins through his name, pantaton pistevonta is avton, to everyone believing in him. So he's showing it. And now it's no longer the Jew that can't eat certain things, that can't touch certain things, can't be around people that are not Jewish, but it's all changing. And he's showing this to Cornelius, and he's showing it to himself, and he's showing it to us. So for us today, why does anyone want to go back under the law? And all these dietary restrictions, there's way more. So if you go underneath back to the law, then you have to do the whole thing. And there's a lot of things in the law that I don't want to go back to. I prefer the gift of grace that we have today. And then the result is the next section. The nations receive the present of the Agios Pneummatos.